Huh. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Wednesday afternoon work session. I think we'll get right into it. We're doing allocations, right? Okay, Kathy.
Thank you.
You all kinds of. Okay,
Yes, IT's first.
okay.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. Is it on? It's green light. Okay, so the cost allocation information for technology, I've handed out to you. We, in our prior models, we pretty much had included all of the costs for salaries, wages, and benefits, all software licenses and maintenance agreements for all of our major systems utilized by the entire county. Some specialized software would not be included in that. They'd be included
Kathy,
in
could you do me a favor and bring it even closer?
even closer. Okay, how about that? Better?
That's
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Okay. So specialized software for departments, they would pick those costs up in their own budgets. But the majority of the software that's for the entire county
Gotcha. So if
is
it's,
IT.
whatever we pick up is just for the courts, for example, it just stays over there. Okay.
Also included in IT allocation model was an allocation, an expense for all the desktop replacements. That was under minor equipment. And they were using basically a 5-year life. Other supplies and expenses of the IT department. And then finally, there was a category for transfers out for major purchases to the IT reserve account. And those were things where they're awaiting the timing of those major purchases. An example is the Sheriff's Rugged Laptop Program, which is some places I see it's called GTAC. Other places it's called MDT. So in this presentation, I will be using GTAC because that seems like that was in our papers. But it also included some other items like Barracuda, and then another category just called Other, which was not described very well.
So these were funds just put into reserve based on our replacement schedule.
Right.
So, yeah.
So for example, the GTACs are once every 5 years, I believe. And there was a board decision to allocate for that, like about 71,000 per year. So the components, if you wanted to see the actual dollar amounts, the components make up about $4 million in expenses that are in the allocation for the 23 billing. Then the 23 billing had some strange anomalies. I think it was just a clerical error. They used the reserve balance that was on the sheet and they added it in to the allocation. That was about 600,000. Then they just arbitrarily backed out the IT department from the allocation because they had included the IT department in the allocation for to bill themselves, which is not appropriate. And then there was the part for the billing for the GTACs, and it actually is in there twice because it's in the transfers to IT reserve, and then it was in the billings as well. So total billing for 23 was almost $4.5 million.
So we found these errors during this past year?
Yeah, I found those when we were
found-
doing 2024s.
Yeah, okay.
And corrected them. The methodology is pretty simple. It's just basically looking at number of devices and FTEs for the county by department. It's 50% of the allocations based upon the department's devices, basically their desktops, and some laptop inventory. It does not include, I think Kim's told me it doesn't include tablets, things like that, because those are not inventoried. And then 50% is based upon FTEs of the departments. And then again, the billing for the sheriff's rugged laptop replacement was included specifically in the billings, but it wasn't allocated between all departments. It was just billed to the sheriff's department.
I've got questions. I'm not sure they're at the right place. So if they're not, just holler at me. On the prior slide.
Mhm.
On the prior slide again. So when you're talking about the billing, it sounds like you're going to take a point in time and estimate everything. So on Tuesday, January 1st or something like that. And then how do we budget for 2023 since we don't know the number for 20? You see, I'm a little lost in the sequencing. And then are these quarterly payments that are made?
They're annual payments. that
Just
are
one
made.
lump sum annual?
Yeah, one lumps. The departments are billed annually and they're billed in January. And then the expenses are actually estimated, like when we were getting ready to do the 24 cap, we are looking at estimates of a 12-month period. We look at part of the expenses that were incurred 23 already, but then we're estimating, because a lot of the expenses that are actually paid are paid towards the third and fourth quarter for all of the software. And that slide that's up there right now, as far as the cost, that was one of the other things that I noticed, is that they underestimated the software and maintenance contracts because it's actually much higher than that. But by having that mistake where they added the reserve balance in, it offset that mistake that they underestimated the software. So it was kind of a fluke, I think, but
Offsetting
worked.
mistakes. There are operating systems out there that have mistakes here and here, but they complement each other.
so
It's scary.
yeah, so that was very interesting, but in total, the billing is very close to probably what it really should have been, based upon estimating all of the expenses, the labor, software maintenance, et cetera. Those are the top two are your biggest expenses. And the salaries and wages are based upon every position being filled. And that's also budgeted benefits, all positions for 12 months.
Okay.
And based upon a point in time again.
So you fix things as you come into the new year.
Yes.
Okay. And will we get more detail on this a little later?
Yes. Yes. I have 24 numbers coming right up.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
So for 2024 and 2025,
On the advance one slide from where we were before, go back one slide.
this one, the methodology.
Yeah. And then it's strictly based on I'm having trouble figuring that. So maybe an organization has twice as many desktops as it has FTEs.
Well, interest for the county, just in case you're wondering, I have, hold on, if I could just, I have so many papers.
You will be dealing with that later?
No, I can answer that
Okay.
question. It's really interesting because I brought it. Oh, here it is. The county has 596 devices in this calculation, 596. And then we have 606 FTEs in this calculation that are budgeted FTEs. So there's two departments. And so I went through and looked, you know, who does it benefit by doing 50-50? And the jail and public works are two departments that actually benefit by having the 50-50 split because they have more FTEs than they have devices. But other than that, most other departments, it's pretty, you could pick FTE or you could pick devices. It's pretty much the same number.
Okay.
So there's very few that actually benefit from the 50-50 model, but both of those are fairly large departments.
So if we take the total 4 million, split it in two, one pot, another pot, then we just go strictly like you say here. It's just, okay. And all right, I understand.
It's a pretty simple allocation. And we could change it to where it's just one or the other. But really, I'd recommend keeping it the way it is. There's only two departments that really benefit from this model. So, and they're the pretty large departments. Okay, so I am going to recommend some changes in what I've put together for 24 and 25. And basically, all of the top ones stay the same. The only one that I'm recommending a change on is the transfers out for major purchases. I recommend that it be a little bit more defined. And so, for example, the G tax are defined very well, but then the rest of the stuff in there didn't seem like it had ever been updated for many years. So I'm recommending that we actually define it better and make sure that we have good records on what's in that transfer. And right now we're recommending that it covers preliminarily the telephone, servers, and infrastructure should actually be in there. And then we should probably utilize the IT acquisition committee that was established in 2022 to formally review this and look at the planning for the IT reserve. So those are my recommendations on that. And I'll get into the details of what's in there.
Okay, is
this
this
allocation.
is this the right time to answer if the Public Works wants to buy this accounting package that they're talking about? How would you deal with that?
Well, in the budget process, there's a form for budgeting for IT purchases. And so those are submitted as part of the budget package. Those were due.
For Public Works.
Yeah, for any department.
Right, but I'd like to bear down on this
On
one
that.
example so I can understand.
Okay, and so that one it's already come in. Those IT purchases that are requested by departments are going to come before the board at a special workshop, I think in October. I've slated one of the dates in October.
But so I'm assuming that IT has to approve whatever software has to go.
Yes,
But it's really a Public Works department with approval.
yes.
That
So we're recommending that as part of, I'm going to try to build into that process, this IT acquisition committee that hadn't existed prior to this budget, actually sharing those requests with that committee first, which IT is a part of that, and actually making sure that they're viewed by this committee and questions
Yeah.
are asked then.
Yeah. I'm trying to drive in another direction.
And then if if they review it and they're recommending it move forward, then it would come to the board at a workshop.
Right. But then once, unless it's a miraculous software package, they may decide to hire their own expert on the package, or they may ask IT to hire their own expert on the package. Let's assume for the moment they have to have IT's help and they ask IT to take care of maintaining the package, including the hand holding or whatever the tailoring is required. How does that get allocated out then?
Yeah, that's a dilemma because our cost allocation's done in the, we finish it in the month of May so that everybody can get their budget numbers in June when they're preparing their budgets. And so a decision like that involves additional cost that may be part of IT, if IT were to take it over, maintaining it, are not built into the cost allocation. So then we would have to either catch up in the next year's cost allocation, or we would have to dip into the reserve
Okay.
possibly.
I'm clearly not asking it in the
Yeah,
right
I
way.
don't-
If, assume we have a continuity, we've had this software package for years at Public Works. And they require a particular expertise to maintain that package. That expertise could lie in Public Works, and in which case there is no allocation issue. But if
Right.
it is in IT, how would you allocate the cost of this specially dedicated individual?
I'm not understand. Kim, do you?
Might. So you're talking about maintaining the package. Where's the cost allocation for the man hours, the IT, like the elbow grease, supporting that package?
Yes, and the reason I'm asking that is because you want a system that doesn't allow Department X to encumber the IT with something that everybody else pays for. It's too easy to do that. So I'm asking, what tipped me off that question is when it says all IT salaries, wages and benefits are added there. So that means everybody's equal, but this department probably needs the more expensive people, and this hardly ever touches anybody.
Yeah, I did ask him, when I was preparing this, that was one of the questions that I asked, are all these salaries, are any of them specialized? Are any of them specialized to a particular software, particular support? Because I was looking for that to say, if they were, then they would not be part of the general allocation. They would be more specifically allocated to that department. For example, whatever their effort goes to, that's where they would be allocated. But I think for the most part, all of this staff work on, I think we
Yeah.
discussed it, they work on all of the general software.
So you're saying there'd be two expense items to that department. There'd be an allocation expense and there'd be a
Right.
IT management expense. or
that's what I
something
would
like that. A
recommend.
Direct expense to them that doesn't go to anybody else.
Oh, whoa, is that what you said?
If there were IT salaries that actually specialized in one particular software that benefited one particular department, then I would pull them out of the general allocation and they would get their own allocation of that particular expense as a direct cap allocation.
Right, so if it's not, yeah, and in that case, there some thoughts for in the past. I don't know if they'd apply now. I know the courts didn't want to have to vie with other people's problems and said, we want our own staff. And I thought, that's probably not a bad idea. But then that would be, we'd have to, and you just answered it, so that's how we would do it.
Yeah. And that's something when I first looked at this, I did ask Kim, we went over all the personnel. I said, are any of them specialized for any one department or purpose or shared between two departments? Because they should be pulled out of the general allocation and get their own allocation if they're directly if they're a direct expense of that department.
Now, would you normally do that in a time card? Like I worked 4 hours on Public Works Department issue and they authorized me to charge to that
Yeah,
account
I-
number.
I mean, I don't think we have a sophisticated enough system to do that, to
All
do
right.
time and effort. I would recommend that we just look at it on an annual basis and do estimating, like what percent, if that person was, 50% or more dedicated to a particular department or particular software, maintaining that.
So you wouldn't, IT wouldn't normally keep track of how many hours they spend on this package versus that package? You
I don't
probably
know.
do, don't you?
Not on our, sorry, not on our timesheet. PeopleSoft does have the ability to break out by projects. The only dedicated staff to like a software is our PeopleSoft team, but that is benefiting the whole county. So that's really the only one that I could clearly go, they only work on PeopleSoft.
When we do time cards now, people have to put in vacation, sick leave, or anything else?
For our group, in a majority of the county, we don't use project costing,
No project costing at all? Okay,
but we could. It's just not past practice.
yeah, all right.
Okay, so I think I answered that question. All of the IT staff are allocated equally to the entire county.
Yeah, and if there is something exceptional, it is estimated.
So next slide, again, changes just in processing. We're not going to make the same mistake and include the reserve in the total for the allocation. That was an error. We're going to exclude the IT department from the 50/50 billing because those costs need to be covered. They just can't be removed. And then the software maintenance was significantly understated. We now have a pretty detailed listing of all the major software and the costs that we're estimating for those pieces of software. The professional services was understated as well. And then transfer to the IT reserve is, I would like it to be more focused on long-term replacement of critical infrastructure and hardware, things like that to support the operations and to involve the IT acquisition committee that's new as well.
How about a dumb question? How'd you get the euro sign?
How did I get the, I don't know, my little software, it just designer,
All right, okay.
it pre-selected those crazy things.
And then when you say the software maintenance was significantly understated, that's budget compared to actuals.
Yes.
Okay, and then on the subsequent year, you're going to use the actuals plus an escalation for your
Yes.
budget. Okay,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I'm actually curious, it's just not an important number, but in the old days, software package that you bought would almost always have 15% annual maintenance. Are we still in that ballpark?
I'm not sure that we're in that ballpark. What, Kim, you used 13%, I think.
I use 13%.
Okay,
So similar to what you're
it's
saying.
about the same. All right.
Yeah. And I'm recommending that we keep the bills at the 50/50 devices and FTE plan that we currently have, not to change that. And continue to bill separate for the GTAC because that benefits one specific department. Bill for the infrastructure and the major hardware would be separated on our actual bills. So it'd be a little bit more transparent for the departments to say, one bill is paying for operations and one bill is paying for helping us to replace and make sure that we stay updated on all of our infrastructure and major components. I think it just lends more transparency. What are they paying for?
Yeah, I don't know how it fits today, but storage space is fairly cheap, but we we get requests often for, well, we've exceeded our 100 terabytes. We need another 100 terabytes. Some departments really don't generate much, but we're not going to that granularity either.
No. Mm-mm.
Is that something we would want to look at to encourage identification of, okay,
Yeah, my intention is to start addressing and incentivizing, like you own this much of our storage. So therefore, if we need to plan for replacement, therefore your ratio is this percent, whereas smaller departments would have
got it.
a different allocation rate based off of their storage amount.
And you already have that storage space so marked or designated?
We're auditing that through our discussions on retention and such. But to the point of where we're billing departments for that, that's not yet addressed. But we are, I think, looking towards moving into that direction.
So I think that means if I ask to take a look at the major storage area, and I pick out a file, I cannot know without examining the contents, saying it's Public Works or it's Commissioner's Office or it's the courts.
We have like Active Directory groups and how things are associated. So we could break it down to the department level. So where you're pulling that
So,
file. So yes,
but you currently don't do it, but you can do it, is what you're saying.
yes. And
Okay.
my intent is to move in that
Got it.
direction.
Okay, thank you.
And then we also would like to recommend, this was Kim's idea. We actually have bills that we send these bills out, like I said, on an annual basis to every department. And then somebody in the department has to prepare that, request a check, all of that. And so instead of doing it by billings, where they have to process an invoice, we're looking at the same thing that Public Works is currently doing, which is an authorization. And it's more efficient and avoids labor, all the labor put into processing invoices. So we're looking at doing that. The next page is just to show you a comparison of the allocation components as far as the dollar amounts. And as I said, last year we billed $4.4 million because of some of those mistakes and pulling in that reserve balance into the bill.
Mhm.
But we're going to still be billing approximately the same amount we billed last year, which is almost 4.5 million. But we've corrected our estimates for software. It went from 871 to 1.3 million. And then we're escalating it for 2025. Our minor equipment, this one it fluctuates, but it doesn't fluctuate drastically over the period of the last 5 years I looked at. It's anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000. So we placed it at 400,000. There may be, a year that we need more than 400,000, but we'll look at that once we have a good inventory of all of our computers and what year they need to come up for replacement. And then other expenses are professional services, things like that. And then transfers to the IT reserve. This one was a really interesting one because when I did research, we put it in our cap, our cost allocation, but we never did the transfer to IT reserve. So for the last, 6-7 years, the transfer has not been made. And that's why IT had accumulated in the operating account a significant fund balance. So as you may remember at our last budget amendment, we fixed that and moved the money from operations to the reserve account. So anyway, very interesting. So transfers to IT reserve, we are going to ask for a little bit more to be going there, and I have a detail on that on the next slide.
It's,
Any questions on this?
yeah, 24 and 25 are the same for the IT. transfers, the reserve?
For the 2 years,
Yeah,
For-
yeah.
yeah, I just left it the same.
But,
For now.
but that is somewhat an arbitrary number, isn't it?
Yes, but I'd like it to get to be more, and that's what we're recommending, is for us to really do good planning on that number and to know what is it that we're planning to replace or spend or set aside. Really, it's setting aside money so that when the time comes, you have it in your reserve. For example, the telephone system. That
Right.
was
No,
recently replaced.
I know how it's used. I
Yeah.
just, I know the rationale behind it. I don't know how we pick a number.
And the next slide, I have detail of how we came up with this particular number.
Okay.
So we selected a few of the major items that look like we need to start planning for. And so telephone system, I know we just purchased one. And so this is setting aside money every year for the next 10 years to basically plan for the next replacement. Then we also have servers, and this is just an estimate. We used the number 75 servers, and we said those probably need to be replaced every 7 years. And so it worked out to about 11 a year. And so that represents the number we would need to set aside so that we could be replacing our servers. And then network infrastructure, switches, power supply, things like that. We came up with some estimates. I don't know if that's too low, too high. It's in the ballpark. And we estimated a number. We really need to refine these better, but we need to have a starting point. And so this was where I started from. And then we also estimated something for cybersecurity infrastructure and used a 10-year life as well for that. And most of this is, like I said, most of this is hardware type purchases. So I came up with a number and said this would be shared by all of the departments. And that's how I came up with a number for our set aside each year to transfer to the IT reserve and to continue the one we're doing for the GTAX.
Okay, and the GTAC has me a little confused. I thought the sheriff had to pay for that.
They do, and they get their own bill for that, and they're paying IT, but IT sets it aside in the reserve account until it's time to purchase all of it at one time.
And that's because IT is the one that does the purchasing?
Yes. And I think they're up for their replacements in 2025. And so we currently already have set aside just for their billings $420,000 of the IT reserve balance right now is their funds.
Rick, I'm curious, how did fiber do the lifetime computation under desktops or on their servers?
A lot of it was on some of the major stuff, our regulatory agency would tell us what you can do, like on buildings and stuff. On some of the others, a lot of it was the IT staff would lay out with the board, and it'd be kind of more of a board decision how often they wanted to trade those out. I think on our servers, and I could be speaking wrong, but I think we came on a number of 5 because they wanted to turn them out faster than that. But it was kind of a combination of IT department recommendation and board comfort level.
Yeah, the reason I asked is the same discussion I had with with the auto stuff or the equipment stuff with the Public Works Department. They were swapping vehicles out on a timetable, and a lot of us have very old trucks. They still work, and we keep them because personally it makes sense for us to keep it. It's a different question when you're in an organization that has to maintain them, and I understand that. But it still seems to me that when we put a 5-year on something, we're throwing good stuff out.
Yeah. Well, currently, when you purchase your, I think in the purchase price of these computers, they're purchasing a 5-year warranty for failure.
Yeah. But you know about stuff, it either fails soon or it's a long time before it fails. But it's tied in with operations also. We had to replace all the Intel-based guys or all the Microsoft-based guys because Windows 11 requires special hardware
Yeah.
support. But beyond that, then I'm like,
Yeah.
Like-
We would run into some of that too. They'd stop supporting and we'd have to move over to,
yeah.
yeah.
But I have the machine I currently use and do a lot of stuff from home is probably a little over 8 years old. And the only problem I have with it is that I want it to be faster, but with the stuff I do, doesn't really matter. And I can't put Windows 11 on, and I always stay up with the current version. So eventually I'll have to do that, but switching machines is onerous. And that's where the
Yeah.
operations thing comes in. That I
But-
don't know the costs involved.
And you're seeing some institutions make the decision like a lot of operating systems for banks now, you can just have whatever system you use, they'll do all that for you. There's a fee for that, doing that, and you're using their equipment and they're the ones that are
Right. And
on
that,
all that. And that's an option you can do.
that's closer to what we've got here, isn't it? We, like Dell has a in the purchase, you're buying a 5-year warranty, and then
Right.
they say, we'll give you a great price on new hardware at that time or some such thing.
It's for the life of that unit. So if like new hardware is required, they'll encompass that typically within the warranty.
Yeah, but at the end of the warranty period, we still hang on to it, or we do away with that hardware.
Currently, we go through a recycling process for
Yeah.
hardware.
At some point at the bottom of your list, I'd really like to relook at that, but that's at the bottom of your list.
So this is how we came up with what's being should be transferred to the IT reserves. As part of looking at the cost allocation, I also, we're looking at the fund balance. I wanted to make sure we also do that at the same time. So for the IT operating, I've recommended that we keep that fund balance at about 2 months of operating cost. And so when we did the budget amendment, that's what we did.
Operating costs there, can you give me the top components of that then? You're not including new purchases in that, just maintenance, license, electric.
Actually, I utilized, hold on.
You just split the year into 2 months?
Yeah, so all I did was I took all of the costs, salaries, wages, computer software, minor equipment, other expenses. And
Got it.
that's the
Okay.
number I used as the operating cost.
Essentially, if I divide 4 million by 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically. And then the IT reserve also has the balance, like I said, in it right now for the sheriff's rugged laptop replacement of about 420,000. Then the good news is, in addition to all that, there is an additional balance that's unallocated. It's not set up for any particular thing. It's about $1.5 million. So this provides a cushion for unanticipated equipment replacements, a future ERP implementation, and only could be spent if it's brought to the IT acquisition committee, who would recommend to the commissioners for approval if we were to tap into that particular reserve.
So just to be sure, the purchase would go through approval of the IT acquisition committee and then to the board.
Right, because we won't be budgeting it as any expense. It'll be sitting in fund balance. And so for purpose of having authority to spend, we'd have to first receive board approval, commissioner's approval.
Who do you have in the IT acquisition committee?
It's a number of individuals. It's IT, it's well, you're more familiar with it, Kim.
It was part of the November policy that we adopted, and it defined that it's the IT management team, a stakeholder within IT, purchasing. Well, that's one we need to add, risk management, the budget office, and then a county stakeholder, like a department,
And what?
a stakeholder in a county department. So if I'm doing something for auditors, I would include Carolyn. She would be a county stakeholder. So it's a good handful of individuals.
Yeah, I'm thinking we should have, how often does this group meet?
It's relatively new, so we haven't
Okay,
developed anything
What
formal.
I'm thinking about is, and I'm thinking of past history, not bearing anything now, just past history. A lot of decisions were made in various corners of the county by people who didn't know really what the big picture was, didn't have the expertise. So I'm wondering if we would have interest in hiring a consultant for a couple of days a year or something like that to meet with the acquisition and say, why are you buying this when this is available? I don't know how you get that individual, but you might be able to find someone who heads up an outfit like, just off the top of my head, I'd invite, okay, Tim Sutton, we'd like to pay you for a few hours of you taking a look at what we're trying to do from a purchasing standpoint, not to redesign anything, but we state the objective. We think we need to buy this for these reasons. And then he'll come in and he'll say, well, did you take into account that things are moving differently or so forth? It just helps me be more comfortable. There's no axe to grind from an outside guy like that.
I don't have any heartburn with that type of thing.
I'm familiar with something like that. We would
Yeah.
have an audit committee and we would always have someone from the outside.
Yeah.
Well, actually, most of the individuals on the audit committee were from the outside. But we had one specific person that was a CIO so that we could address audit issues related to security.
When it's when it's all people that work with in our bank, your glasses get a little tinted.
Yes.
And so
exactly.
sometimes it's nice to have somebody from outside that has clear glasses and
So,
can say, what about this?
I'd like to affect that.
I'm in agreement, sure.
Since it's a policy, I would assume it need to come back to the
Yeah. it's gotta come back
Commissioners
to us,
to
yeah.
formally, and like Kim said, we'd like to add purchasing into the,
Yeah, I
to the
think that's a
committee as
good
well.
idea too.
Yeah.
It's great to have an item that you cannot buy for various reasons.
Okay, so
So you will expect that you'll come before us sometime with that.
Sorry, I had a frog in my throat. Yes, the policy is already established, but we can amend
Okay,
that section where it defines the
okay,
numbers.
thank you.
And then, like I said, we want to plan to continue inventorying all of our hardware and our infrastructure. We believe that there's a need to set aside funds annually for infrastructure, things of those natures. And we want to budget that in the yearly procurement. And so, like I said, right now, we just used a preliminary number of 426,000 to build the general departments, and for that purpose to set aside.
That's for equipment or for labor to implement?
It's for equipment, mostly for hardware. It was part of the allocation model that we currently have.
I am confused again.
Well, it's sitting in the fund balance, so that's why I brought it up in this slide, saying we want to keep that in the allocation model, but we want
Worried
to
about that.
monitor the balance.
Yeah, that's just not what I'm worried about. I'm thinking, like, my laptop, our laptop does the barcode on it. And just a thought that comes to mind is, but there is a serial number on the processor inside it. There's even serial number on the OS and all that. And that's something you all can have access to. But so maybe that can be improved, but what exactly will the 426K buy for us?
So it's to provide a mechanism to build up a balance, a cash balance, a fund balance, so that in the future, when you need to replace a major switch, or you need to replace the
Oh, this
telephone
has nothing to
system.
do with tracking.
No, this,
Oh, I thought,
but we
This is
want,
that previous sheet.
yeah, but
yeah,
we
yeah.
need to continue to inventory all of our hardware and infrastructure. That's been begun under Kim, and so we just need to keep that up to absolutely make sure we have a good.
Yeah,
eye
that's
on
good.
that.
I just misunderstood.
Yeah.
When the first sentence starts out, continue to inventory hardware and infrastructure.
It wasn't something that I think was done very well. It was done on a
That's the key word, isn't it?
and so anyway, so we just need to continue to do that and keep it as part of our annual process to make sure that we have that. And then finally, I just think that the IT acquisition committee would benefit by helping look at these reserves on an annual basis too. And just have somebody else looking at them and making sure we're not forgetting anything that we want to reserve for and that we want funds in the future. So that's it for the IT allocation.
I think you've, for my scanning of it and what it appears was done in the past, I think you've made some nice tweaks to it to further refine. And it sounds like you got some ideas to even further refine. So
Yeah. And documenting everything. There's a lot of stuff that wasn't documented, and
I've worked with you long enough. I know you'll do that. So.
okay. So the next item that y'all had asked to have a workshop on, and so thank you, Kim, is the risk pool.
Yeah.
So more paper. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. This was a little thicker. That's foreboding.
This is going to be a big piece of gristle.
Whoa.
So you have to, in order to do the cost allocation for our insurance and for our risk management, the biggest piece of it is the risk pool. So understanding the risk, a little bit about the risk pool is important. And risk, the two major pieces in the risk pool are our liability pool and our property pool. And on the liability pool, we're set to pay, the new assessment is $1.7 million just for that item. And I do like how they do the assessment because it's based upon several factors, not just one factor. They take, the first thing that they do is they take a look at our workers' hours. And in this case, for 24's assessment, our workers' hours went up 8% over previous year. But I'm giving you a little history. I'm showing you what it was in 21, 22, and then 23's hours. So that's 8% increase. So it has a factor, everything is factored off our workers' hours actually for the liability pool. And then they come up with what is it that they need to have in the allocation in total to cover, to be prudent and to cover the risk and to put money aside for our, because the pool is actually broken into several pieces. And so I'm not going to go over all these papers. I'll give you some of them for if you want to look at it later. But they come up with the base rate, and it has gone up drastically. If you'll notice, it went from 1.129 to 1.581. And for this model, it's going up to 1.897. And that is a factor of the fact that a lot of the policies, the excess policies that they're having to procure have gone up over 100% on some of them. So they were paying about $7 million in total for reinsurance, and it's going up to $14 million. They're estimating, and they have a lot of carriers that actually don't want to participate any longer, so they had to go out and find other carriers. So it's just the world we're operating in. It's very volatile. They ran some loss ratios and showed us that why some of the carriers are dropping out, because they've, over a period of 6 years, they brought in less in premiums from us than they paid out in claims. So
On that slide, that's a typo, isn't it?
which one? Going up
Third
20%?
third column, 20, that should be 23, 24.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
you're right. Typo.
And then the number 1897, that's the one that we pay to the risk pool people for this portion, and that's an annual number.
Annual number.
Okay.
So they have a base rate, and that went up 20%. Modification factor is another piece of the calculation, and that's based upon our actual loss ratio for us. So ours has gone up slightly, which is good that it didn't go up drastically. And then they have another factor in there called the deductible factor. And right now that deductible factor is based upon us being at, I think we're currently at 100K deductible. But they have different rates for if you wanted to be at 250 deductible. And in the next slide,
Wait,
y'all,
I'm still trying to digest this. I'm sorry, I'm slow. Do you track this 100%?
I have a slide later. I can show you exactly how it calculates out,
Okay.
or handouts.
The bottom two are based on our history. The top two are based on industry.
Right, based upon the risk pool.
Yeah, but how do
Cost.
they compute our how do they compute our loss factor? Because we're not a pool, we're a member of a pool.
But they actually have all the information by member. And so that's what that modification factor is. They're
Right,
look-
so if we,
looking specifically at us.
if we pay $2 million in premium and we pay out 2.1, that's what they're trying to show down here
Right.
in the bottom line
Right.
somewhere. And the point, anything under 1.0 still seems pretty good to me. Am I missing something?
The which one? The,
The loss ratio, insurance companies want to go for at least no more than 98%, paying out 98% of the premium. And
Right.
here, I don't know how to get that number out of here.
yeah, I'm not sure. I can go back and get more
Okay,
information
all
on
right.
that one. But for us, it only went up 2%, our modification factor, which is good. We want to maintain a low increase in that.
Now, does that, how do I compare that 2% to anyone else's or to the 20% above? In other words, are we doing better than average or worse than average?
Well, hold on, I have some information on that. So our percentage went up on the modification factor. Our percentage only went up 2%, but there are others that went up as much as 6%. Some went down 10%. There's one that went up 12%. That's Spokane's. So they go all over the place.
I see. So it sounds like we're probably in the middle someplace.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. By the way, I should thank you again for stepping into this.
And then,
It's his fault.
yeah, so the modification factor, like I said, some saw, Benton saw only a 1% increase. But the largest one was Spokane and they had a 12%, but it's based upon, our
Experience.
loss, our experience.
Yeah.
They also, at this past meeting, voted to look at our experience, not just over 1 year, because I think these were looked at over 1 year or a very short period of time. And they're changing it on the new allocation to actually look at 10 years. So it helps you because then you can have a smoothing out. If you had a really bad year,
Right. It's
don't-
sliding 10,
right,
but that almost seems too broad though.
yeah.
Anyhow. I'm sure they don't need my advice.
So anyway, so y'all had asked me to look at what would the savings be if we changed our deductible on the liability pool. And so based upon their rates, if we changed our deductible to 250,000, for example, our cost would go down about $162,000. But we would have to suffer that difference, 150,000 per claim. And I wouldn't recommend changing our deductible right now.
You would or would not?
I would not, because you're taking on more risk because right now we currently have 5 claims. We've had as many as, we closed 2 recently
A
this
single,
summer.
yeah.
And so we've had 7 at one time sitting there, and you potentially could pay out on all of them. So I would not recommend changing our deductible.
If you paid out
Just
that
one. yeah.
extra 150 on all 7, in a worst case scenario, you're pretty close to $1 million
Yeah.
while you're trying to
agree with you,
save
yeah.
162. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So to me, I'm pretty risk adverse when it comes to something like this, the unknown. So
You see, I wouldn't even call it risk averse. It's just common sense, one single incident and you're back to
on
zero.
the second incident, you're
Yeah, so
upside down.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised it's so obvious.
Mhm. So that's the liability pool. And then on the property, our insured value is a little over $200 million. They do it on a basis of 100,000 valuation. So on all the paperwork that they have, it knocks us down to, to the 2 million that they're using as a basis. And then they have a deductible rate for the property, and they multiply that times this base. And right now it's a 0.129, and that gets you your all peril rate. And then they have another factor called a catastrophic index allocation. And that they have a number that they're trying to target. And for the total pool, it's about almost $4 million. And so we're at 9.4% on that catastrophic assessment. And so that makes up another component of how we're charged. So part of what we're charged is all peril, and then part of it is a catastrophic assessment. Unfortunately, 2024 is an increase 36% over 2023. And when I had originally done our cost allocation on risk, I had put in a 30% increase for the property because this is one that's been very volatile with so many major catastrophic incidents with fires, earthquakes, flooding. The property insurance is very volatile right now.
I bet you thought you were being outlandish at the 30.
I was hoping I was being outlandish, but I wasn't. So it came in at 36%. So
So are we comparing apples to apples from one year to the next in this case?
that I don't know if what our catastrophic index, let me see if I can see what our catastrophic index was. I gave you also have some little information on the property pool. So our insured value went up for us about 16% because, like I said, they did some appraisals and they came in with some higher appraisals than previously.
They
It's not,
put a bigger finger in the wind.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know what our cat exposure was before. I don't have that number. But we are one of the higher cat exposures in the pool.
Is
The
that
highest one is 10.4%, and that's Skagit County. And then Thurston County is at 9.3, and we're at 9.4.
Is that based on some experience?
Well, what it says that it's a model, and it's the results from a hazard and AAL done by a group. And it was done back, I think, in November of 21.
You know what I'm
But
thinking?
I don't know if it's looking at the, our geographic location and I don't know how they're doing it.
Those guys live by Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, but then they multiply by the probability that year it's going to go, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty small number. I actually, where my mind is going is the sort of in Thurston, they've got all those homeless camps and issues there, and I'm thinking maybe we're striking the bonanza there too.
Some of that.
Lewis County is 9.9.
Oh,
So I
take
don't
back
know.
my theory.
Not that we can probably do much about it. I would be kind of interested in how they.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know if it has to do with, are we on a fault
Yeah.
line? Are we, because we have high
Yeah.
forest? I don't know. If we, like
Well,
you said, we
Could
have
be some
Mount
of the
St.
fault line
Helens.
because it runs right up there. If you're talking Cowlitz, Lewis and Thurston, all about the same.
are they? I'm unfamiliar with fault lines up here.
Yeah, Well, we had the one guy in at one time talking about there's a major fault line that runs up for earthquake.
Hmm.
And then the fact that we have, as far as flooding, we have a number of rivers.
Well, I bet the lowland is the big factor because
The big
most of our
factor.
facilities are in the lowland.
I would have to, on the property, I have to say it has something to do with, our geographic location.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. Makes many dollars and cents.
So do I have anything else after that one? Okay, then that one I did, again, I went and looked at what would it do if we changed our deductible? And right now, we're at 5,000, which seems pretty low. And if we changed it to 25,000, what would that do? It would save us about $17,000. I don't know what our risk is, age of our buildings, things like that. So, you look at things like number of roofs, new roofs, what are your ages of your roofs? What's the ages of your buildings?
But that's only like if they collapse or,
Fire,
it's-
It's
things
not
like
gonna be
that.
anything routine maintenance type things.
Yeah.
right, probably not that, but like if the windows, sometimes windows do strange things and maybe explode on their own. I'm totally serious.
Mhm,
That's what would be covered in this?
mhm. It's property contents, you had a major storm, blew in and blew off the roof.
What's the
Um,
upper limit on that? So if, I mean, would we have a damage claim for $100,000? That'd be, how about 10 times that, $1 million?
yeah,
That's still in there.
mhm.
I'm
The
okay
the
with
savings is
5,000.
so small.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want.
I
don't
think
know
we're
what-
with you.
stay with the deductible that we're at, or,
No, stay.
yeah, it's very small. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's that. You have to understand the risk pool in order to understand, because it's the major component of our allocation. So I have bad news on the insurance and risk management allocation. So of course, saved it for last.
So the total bill for our risk pool, you were telling us it's astronomical, right?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear.
The total bill that we pay to the risk pool,
Yes, it's going to be 1.7 million for the liability portion. It's going to be 620,000 for the property portion. The good news is our cyber didn't go up. It's a very small policy. It's 24,000 that they're charging us for that. It's really good. But yeah, you're talking about over $2 million just in payments to the risk pool.
and that's the new price.
Yeah, that's the new price. So when I looked at the allocation, the prior models, there was one done in 2019. And that looks like that's the last time the model was actually updated. They basically were just doing an increment every year. And so anyway, so 2019 model had most of the policy. They had it very complex. They had every single policy, every single item allocated. And they were using a 50-50 model also, their workers' hours and FTEs. And they also had the property allocated based upon value of property. So if the value of a property as a percentage of the total value. When they did that, most of the facilities maintenance received most of the allocation, but some of the allocation actually went to the road fund, the health and human services, the water sewer funds, a small portion. But anyway, so that's the way they did it. And then in the 2019 model, they had vehicles, insurance, and they split that primarily between motor pool and R&R equipment. And then a small portion of the liability claims was actually included, reserve was included in the allocation, but again, never transferred to the fund. They included in the allocation, but they never ever transferred it.
So that would hit our ending fund balance.
So there's a problem. And I'll get into it when we talk about the reserves or what we have left in the accounts. So the overview of the billing for 2023, based upon that, was about a $2.3 million bill that was billed to departments. When you looked at it from a holistic, most of that went to the general fund. Non-departmental received about 29%. Facilities, 12% of that total. Jail and other general funds, 23%. Special revenue funds got 19%. Enterprise funds, 13%, and service centers, 4%. So by far, the general fund received, almost 60% of the bill. So.
For that number, you're just adding up.
Yeah, that was for 2023. So now for 2024 and 2025. So this is a project I had given to our budget analyst to work on and work with Victoria on this. And basically they couldn't locate the old files, stuff like that. So we just had to make some decisions how we're going to allocate everything. So when looking at it, here's some of the things that I've discovered. All the policies and the risk pool payments were detailed in the allocation. And I don't know why I put this in here, but they didn't, in prior years, they didn't really fully estimate fully the risk pool, and they actually underfunded the account in 2020 and 2021, which is having an impact right now on our account. Most of the cost is allocated based upon hours worked model. I didn't know until I did some research and finally found that 2019 file that it was 50-50. It was hours and FTEs. I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. And so I'm saying that I don't think I recommend changing that. Just use that's how the risk pool is allocated to us, is based upon the hours. And then on the property, we made the decision to allocate it based upon square feet in this 24 and 25 allocation. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but we did it because we were running out of time and we needed to get everything finished. It looks like when I look at the 2019 details, it probably is the better way to do it based upon the valuation of the properties. So we may want to redo the allocation to do it that way. I'll show you what the impact is of what I did. Risk management overhead was allocated like it was before. There was no component in this current billing for the liability claims reserve to cover those costs. So I absolutely know that I'm in the next budget revision, I have to go back and redo our cost allocation for this to include something. Also, when I did it, I didn't have the final risk pool increases. And so I believe that I need to redo this, and that's cutting it off a little bit, but I really think I'm about 400,000 short on what I should have billed out for the risk management cost allocation. And that pains me to say, but that's the prudent thing to do, is go back and redo the cost allocation for risk management because it's underfunded right now. So the current allocation that I did for 2024, and this is the spread, it looks a little bit different than the previous one in 23. General fund non-departmental is now receiving 33% of the bill. Facilities, 23%. Jail and other funds, 15%, where before they were getting about over 20%. Special revenue funds is about the same. It's 17%. Enterprise, not significantly different, 9%. And then service center, 4%, just like before. So the one that really changed was the jail and other funds and the non-departmental general fund. So I don't know, but I think I need to go back and do the 2024 and 2025 billing to include all components and those increases. So it means that we'll probably be needing to bill out more like $3 million versus the 2.3 that it was before. The other thing I discovered, so here's a breakdown of what I currently have in there, is billing 2.6, 2.7 for 2025. But like I said, I need to probably go back and change because that risk pool number is higher. And then finally, in doing this, I don't think it's been looked at before. I mean, I can tell you it hasn't been looked at before. The cash on hand is primarily depleted in the risk pool account, the risk management account. And when I looked back in 20 and 21, the billings for the expenses that we budgeted or that we actually had exceeded the revenue brought in. And for just both of those years, it was $800,000. And so the bad news is I don't know what to do here. I need to formally request a transfer to shore up our risk pool numbers, and it's about $800,000 to make sure we have enough cash. And then the liability claims is its own fund. And it was interesting too. It had been budgeted as an expense, but they were also budgeting revenue for that account, but it was not ever received. It had never received any revenue. So it had been transferred when it was first started, 250,000 was put in there. And then in 2020, there was a transfer from the risk management account of 250,000, but that whole 500,000 has been depleted now, and we have nothing to pay which is basically our liability claims, which is the first 100,000 on those cases that we have outstanding.
We have zero in the deductible payout bin, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that needs to be formally funded as well, because it's out of cash. When the month of July and it's actually June bills and July bills that we paid recently, it's wiped all the cash out. And I don't think anybody had been looking at that, monitoring it. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to come in with bad news here. So anyway, not good.
So 800,000 is what you think gets us back to square and reasonable and safe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we just have to be much more prudent in preparing the cost allocation to begin with to make sure that it's as close to what we're going to be charged.
Yeah. How do we have a way to how do we put something in place that we don't let ourselves get in this position. I mean, you know, McDonald's can make a fry thing, their bell goes off if you, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just, what checks and balance do we have available? So you don't have to come before us again and say, you know, we're
Well,
800,000 short.
somebody needs to be monitored, whoever's, I think it's crossed too many hands on this cost allocation. And then, like I said, for a number of years, they were just adding an increment to it, but not actually analyzing it. And so you actually have to be intimate with what is the risk pool going to charge us? Like they're doing, they're telling us, here's what it's going to be for next year. So I know what to put in there.
Yeah. So as commissioner, I know we're looking for a risk pool position, but as commissioners, when that person is it reasonable to say we'd like a quarterly or a semi-annual report to show where we stand in all these? Is that
Mhm.
reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. I just don't think it'd been monitored at all. And looking at the cash, fund balance, the expenses, and projecting the expenses based upon what the risk pool is telling us.
I won't say anything.
Yeah. I know where you're headed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know you're gonna help.
That's
Well-
bad news, but I end on bad news. Sorry.
I know you're gonna help set up that when that new person we find in there
Mhm.
and I have full confidence you'll do that, but I'm just telling you that should certainly be part so we don't get ourselves in this again.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear we stepped up a notch.
More than a notch.
Okay, sorry it went so long, but
No, thank you.
No, that's, we actually set that up. We didn't want you to be totally bored, you know, we had to have
that's
stuff.
right. You don't
Yeah.
want me to be,
We're thoughtful.
you don't want me to be thinking about going out with my grandkids.
Well, you know, and if it takes time for us to make the best decisions we think we can make, we gotta have the best information available, so it's okay.
Yeah, but it's a good thing you've done, and that's another thanks that we owe you.
Yeah. Can we take 5 minutes between?
wanna
Recess
take a
for
break?
5?
Sure. I'm okay. You haven't
don't know, 6 months.
Yeah,
I apologize. So would you like to go page by page, or would you like kind of a general what we're doing?
Is this, we had an email and I looked through. Is this what,
you
We're-
saw the scratched up.
I saw the
version.
scratched up one.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I'm thinking a lot of this is probably the same. We adopted some of that.
So this is, the park board and I have been going through this over the last few months, changing our old comp plan to include new projects and changing the way that we kind of do things.
Right.
The model what RCO is looking for. I'm not sure what you've seen before.
Just the only Word doc that I forwarded
Okay.
to you, that I sent to you.
For the most part, it's fairly the same. I've taken out some items though. After sending this to RCO and asking for some suggestions, they suggested cutting a couple things out. Not projects or anything like that, just general information that we don't need to include. Fluff for the most part.
I love it, actually, you know.
I was a little surprised. Because in the past, I don't know if this plan had just been passed on every 6 years and they didn't really do much with it. This plan I'd like to change. That way it actually shows what we're going to do, not just here's what every other person would like to see and none of them actually get accomplished.
Yeah, you mean a real document?
We'll go with that. But the population trends and stuff, that's just to give an overview to RCO what our county looks like. And I've updated everything just so it shows, you know, how our population's changed, how we're increasing, our age breakout, showing who we need to tailor our parks to and who we need to tailor them to in the future. We have a lot of kids coming up, which we kind of had a lull with the teenagers for a while, and now we have a lot of them. And we don't have anything for them to do in our parks. That's kind of one of the examples. Let's see here. So I think probably the most important page is page 9.
Page 9.
Yep, if we can go to that, that's our goals and our objectives. So the way RCO wants us to do it now is to have a section with goals that basically says, you know, what do you think you need to do? And then the objectives breaks it down into how we're going to obtain those goals. So like for Riverside Park, we have adding a soccer field. You know, soccer is a growing sport. There's not a lot of facility space in the county. It's kind of, people are fighting. I have multiple groups contacting us for field space because they don't have anywhere to play. So that's kind of where these come from. And these projects are going to change after we go out to the public. In the past, we just send this out to the public and then we don't do anything with it. But this time I'd actually like to hear what people have to say and what kind of projects they'd like to see us do instead of what we think we should do.
How do you do that?
So we're going to be going to a bunch of different meetings. We're going to go to all the different park boards, cities. We're going to go to the port, and then we're going to have meetings in every section of the county. And then we're going to set up a table at the park, which is going to be tons of fun. And then we're also going to be sending out a survey.
How do you do the survey? Just electronically?
Yep.
FB
What?
on Facebook or?
Yeah, we'll do it Facebook. Unless you have any other suggestions.
That's the cheapest and
Yeah.
you can actually divide it up by the zip code too. So you can figure out who's asking for
Where they're at.
what, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with the stuff in the red?
So that's directly from RCO's manual to kind of give you an idea of what they're asking for. So they just updated their manual, I think it was last year, which it changed quite a bit from the last 6 years when we did it. It's a little more specific and they want to know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Not just give us some ideas of what you want to do. So we kind of just took the objectives, listed them all out, and then
On page 9,
Yeah, that's-
what is a pump track?
what's a pump track?
Yeah,
So a pump track it can either be dirt or asphalt, and it's for kids and adults, anybody, any skill level. They can use bikes, they can use scooters, skateboards. And the idea is that you can carry momentum over the bumps and it's got turns.
oh, and that's called a pump track?
It's called a pump track.
Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah,
They're great.
Is that what you're used to that terminology?
no,
Oh,
no.
They're actually,
I couldn't have impressed you with. Yeah. That, I get why we try to word so our CEO likes it because we get a lot of funding from there. I mean,
Yeah.
I get that. I used to sit on IAC, so you'd see those things come through. The only thing I ever ask is by complying with RCO, do we eliminate things for people in the county? Does it create restrictions for our people
what do you
that
mean?
you think of? Like, is there things they don't allow us to do that we know some of our public likes to do, but we can't put it in there because RCO won't give us money?
No, I haven't come
Yeah.
across that yet.
I haven't seen, I never saw that through IAC back in the day either, but I do see it through other departments, so I just like to see it's not creeping in.
have you noticed how he's gotten suspicious in his old age?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm creeping up on their age, so I'm getting more.
I won't give you a hard time.
No, I looked through this, I think, yesterday and a little bit last week, and I didn't have a whole lot of
Yeah,
concerns on it.
Okay. So the plan is that after we take this out to the public, I should be back in December with a final plan. It might look a little bit different, but the structure should be the same, just depending on what the public has to say. And then we just have to have it adopted by January, if we can. That way we can go for grants next year.
I was at the Woodland Council on Monday. They were reaching out for grants because RCO was offering non-match stuff. You're aware of that, okay?
Yeah, it just opened up and it closes. They have it open for a 4-week period. It's a really highly competitive grant, and that's the one that I talked about the last time. And I'm trying to decide between 2 projects, and I'm waiting for some numbers, and then I'll come back to you guys, hopefully within a week or 2, so we can go over that.
Okay. Is, on the match, do they accept labor?
It depends on the grant.
Depends on the grant.
Yeah, the one that's coming up, there's no match required, which is
Right.
like first time
Yeah.
ever.
I don't think I've ever seen that. So that's, yeah.
So it's gonna be highly competitive.
But ones I was used to, you could use labor as a part of it.
Yeah, usually the bigger ones, it's you can use a max of 10% for
Yeah,
in-kind labor.
yeah,
And that's only good for certain projects. Like if you're, installing a new bathroom,
right.
there's not a whole lot of in-kind you can use for that.
Gotcha.
an off the wall kind of question. Are you familiar with Austin Point?
No, I've had the general presentation of what it's going to be, but that's it.
Right. Yeah. Does that strike you one way or the other? It's nigh onto grandiose.
I haven't been out there, physically out there, so I don't really have an opinion.
If you go there, you have to have an escort, I think. It's a trailer park occupying, remember the email I sent that Port of Woodland was looking,
Right.
it's to buy that piece of property so they can turn that into marina and park
Oh,
on the river.
Gotcha.
And you've seen the artist drawings or something like that.
That
They're always
was,
so
it
wonderful.
was a while ago though, that I saw those,
Yeah, probably a year and a half ago, maybe.
at least.
Yeah, okay. I, I don't think those have changed. That ambition to fix that spot and put something there has been there for quite a while.
For me, park space is wonderful for the community. So, I mean, if they can make it happen and it's a good place, not every park is in a good place. So,
If so, trying to use you for information, if I look at this Austin point, there is a sense there that the port would like to buy the property. Do we normally, like, if you wanted to park here, do you look at buying property or,
acquisition,
I beg your pardon?
acquisition.
Yeah. So, have we, when was the last time we acquired property for a park?
I couldn't even tell you,
Okay, it's been at least since last week.
but yeah, before me.
Yeah, okay.
So
Uh,
20 years, 30 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
Normally when we have parks, we are basically taking them from somebody else that wants to give them away. We
Yeah.
don't generally, I don't even know when the last time was that the county would buy property to build a new park.
Anymore, I'm guessing just maintaining them probably takes most of the resources we have.
All the resources, yeah.
Yeah,
It's buying a piece of property. I mean, that's the great thing about RCO is they have grants specifically for acquisition.
yeah,
So it's possible, but you still have to have the 50% match.
yeah.
How much of match on acquisition?
Hmm?
How much is the match on acquisition?
It's usually 50%, but their grants change every 2 years. And
Yeah.
sometimes they change their requirements.
And when you think about your parks and correct, in your mind is always the upfront cost and then the maintenance.
For me,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something.
not everybody.
Yes, we know that. Yeah, and then there's always the how are the bathrooms that were rebuilt at Riverside Park? That were rebuilt a couple of years ago,
Remodeled,
remodeled.
yes. So that was upgrading them so they're ADA accessible, which involved moving toilets, which is a
Yeah.
really big undertaking for concrete and brick building. And then new partitions, so those stall doors and redesigning everything. And that was our remodel. We didn't get new bathrooms, just remodeled bathrooms, only 2 out of 4.
So the public hadn't knocked out the exterior walls yet.
That has not happened yet.
Good.
It'd be
Okay.
nice.
No sarcasm here.
Yeah,
And I'll ask for our colleague who's absent, how are the bathrooms doing or the facility at the Cowerman Park?
So I'm waiting to hear back from building and planning on my permit. And we've gone through with purchasing. It's started.
Okay, and if all goes well, it should go through building and planning pretty quickly, right?
It depends on the company that makes the bathroom. Because
Oh,
it's a precast, so they build them in Spokane and then
Yeah.
they trailer them over and they just set them in the hole and they're done. So it all depends on them. The last time I talked to them, they were out usually about 4 months
oh,
from after documents are signed. But that could have changed.
you took a few of us out to that spot once
Mhm.
before, right? And it's pretty low along the creek, right?
There's a trail that goes down to the creek, yeah.
But it's within a flood reach of the creek.
Not really. I mean, I don't know anymore due to the weather. I
Yeah,
wouldn't think so.
but you don't recall it having a flood over the past
No,
10 years. Okay.
not in my lifetime.
okay,
I'm good.
I'm good.
All right.
Appreciate
Well-
your time.
Absolutely. I'll see you back in December.
Okay.
But if you hang on just a moment, no, not necessarily there is, I think we're going to close, or are we?
Yes, we
Yeah.
are. So nothing else. We will adjourn. Thank you.